Hi guys, thank you for joining. This is Essence of Science, and today we're going to be talking about germ theory versus terrain theory. I'm Amanda Armagast.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence. And my answer to that is, oh my God.
So this is actually a really hot topic right now. That's why I'm bringing it up. And Dr. Abbasi has his opinions, and not only does he
Yes,
have,
Dr.
but get this, not only does he have his opinions, but he has a medical background. Unlike other people who are talking about this right now. So I have a few questions that I wanted to just bring up that I think would be good to clear or just bring attention to. And then Dr. Abbasi is going to use his medical background to answer them. The reason I'm emphasizing that is because a lot of people who are saying fact or myths on this topic actually don't have a medical background. So, for listeners who might not know, can you briefly explain what germ theory is, Dr. Abbasi?
So you remember we did that um, podcast about Semmelweis,
Yeah.
Ignaz Semmelweis. What do you remember about that conversation that you and I had about Ignaz Semmelweis?
Well, what sticks out the most is that he had an idea, he tested his idea, and then he found evidence to back up his idea that what he was thinking was true, that we should be that doctors should be washing their hands after they touch a cadaver and then go to do surgery or take a birth to give birth to a baby
Because before that, the
before
idea
dying.
was before Semmelweis. No, just to understand it clearly, at the time Semmelweis says wash your hand, we did not have germ theory. We didn't know that there is a germ, a living things that get transferred from dead bodies in the cadaver lab to the person you're trying to deliver a baby, and that produces a purpura fever or a so-called special kind of infection that kills almost 1/3 of the women in that location. And you know how we paid for that? People died.
Exactly.
And people died to an amount that everybody knew about that. People would beg not to be admitted to the doctor wards, but to the so-called midwives ward, because midwife wouldn't do the cadaver lab, but we didn't know all of that. All Semmelweis found out is if you wash your hand, people die like 10 times less. So risk of dying was like 4% in the ward with the midwives, and about 25-30% in the doctor's ward. And before that, we had a different theory, the so-called humoral theory, humors, not the humors in the sense of laughing thing, but the humors there. You just did a TikTok about that. Do you remember the TikTok you made about that? With your
No.
cat, with your cat, you trying to have the cat.
Oh, The Last Airbender.
So, okay, what are those things you had in your TikTok? Earth,
Water,
wind, huh? Water,
water, earth, fire, wind.
fire, wind. Those are the four humors that antique Greeks 2,500 years ago, Aristotle said those four things come together and make everything, make every disease. If you have a disease, like you have more than, well, they have other humors and so on, but that was kind of our understanding for thousands of years, that these humors, they come together, and if you have too much of one and too little of another, you have diseases and so on. So, and you remember what was the established response to Semmelweis? They said, "What?
They were against him. He died still being called crazy.
Yeah, he died, as a matter of fact, in a mental asylum." But people, the result of having the wrong theory is not just a podcast or
It's
fun.
human lives.
People die.
But what is germ theory? Can you just say it in 30 seconds? Like, what is the basic layman's terms germ theory?
That there are this microscopic agent of disease that transfer, mostly infection disease, from one location to another, from one person to another, from one area to another.
And then, can you explain in 30 seconds what is terrain theory?
Okay, first of all, I would not call a train theory a theory. Now, people say like gravity is a theory, and then they call like um, theory. People think theory is I come up with a hypothesis with the excuse my French. I come up with the I have to be harsh here. I come up, I wake up in the morning, I have a brain fart, and I call it a theory. This is not what the theory is. Gravity is a theory. The electromagnetic wave string theory or the particle physics is a theory. These are things we have everything information that this is how our universe is run. We have experiment after experiment. People have put their entire lives, generation of people have put their entire life to say gravity is real, it is how it works, and so on. That is a theory. That is a germ theory. Okay? Semmelweis died for it. By the way, 20 years after Semmelweis died, Pasteur proved that the germ theory is true by being able to show that it actually, there's that agent can transfer disease from one to another. Koch, or in German we call it Koch, who was a doctor, could then with the microscope actually show you that bacteria, that truly that germ theory, this is the agent, this is how it works, and so on. So hundreds of thousands of people have put their lives and their career, their paper, published paper, to show that the germ theory is how a disease moves from one area to another. So I would not call terrain theory a theory. I would call the idea, or at best, if I'm really generous to that, and I think every infection disease doctor would back me up on that. Every doctor. As a matter of fact, if a doctor doesn't back me up, I'm harsh enough to say, go back to med school. You didn't learn anything in the med school. So it's not a theory. I would, at the most generous, I would call it the hypothesis of
Yeah.
terrain hypothesis, or if I'm not generous, I would say the crazy brain fart. It's somebody had a stroke and lost 90% of the brain and came up to put that idea at the same level as a germ theory. That now there is a in every brain fart there is a kernel of truth as well, though.
So before we continue, the core belief of terrain theory is that diseases arise when the terrain, the internal environment of the body, immune system, tissues, microbiome, nutrition, stress, toxicity, become imbalanced or weakened. And then the idea of that belief is that germs are opportunistic. So when your body is weakened or susceptible, then you're more likely to get a disease from the germs. That's the core belief of terrain theory, but you can
So
continue.
the terrain theory says that, what really matters is what status you are. The germs play minor role. And my thing to that is, I will give you Ebola. You go
It
and
doesn't it doesn't matter how strong you are. If you're taking care, if you're the strongest man on earth and you're taking care of an Ebola patient and he throws up on you, you're
you'll
done.
die.
You're done.
95% of the time, you will die.
Yeah,
So, but the kernel of truth is that we have an immune system. Our
exactly.
body has certain resources. And if and germs, each of them put certain amount of stress on us. Like Ebola put a lot of stress on you. Like common cold put much less stress on you. How you react to that stress is about how much resources you have. So that is the kernel of truth into the train idea. And that is true. Like obviously, you and I, you remember you gave me lots of time, your cold, common cold or something, you just go over it. And I have a lots of more stressful life, and
Yeah.
I get much sicker. Or you give it somebody an elderly like COVID killed about 1 million people in the United States. But some people say, oh, okay, but they were all elderly and so on. They would be going dying anyway and so on. And they would say, yeah, train, these are old people. They were going to die anyway. But it's truth. Yes, they have less resources, but the triggering factor is not that they have less resources or their train is bad. The triggering factor is something, a stressor in this case, like COVID, put them over the threshold. So I don't know what other question you have here, but I think every infection disease doctor is ready to pull out their hair and hit the hair against the wall. If you just
Yeah.
mention that train theory as at the equal standing with the germ theory.
And I don't think that it's necessarily being measured as equal right now, but I think that we are becoming dangerously close to having it be measured as equal because we have people, I'm not going to say who, in powers, high up powers of position that are referring to terrain theory as if it is equal to germ theory. And actually, I saw a TikTok the other day of a nurse in Florida who said she doesn't believe in germs. And she's a registered nurse.
I think if somebody in healthcare doesn't believe in germs, belief is not the right term really for it.
Yeah, but can you just like, as if you're talking to, like, can you simplify it? Why is it important to understand the difference between terrain theory and germ theory?
Because how you behave is different. Like if you believe in terrain, the germ don't matter. Why put the mask on? Why get vaccinated? Why do and we understand those people who are in train, there are all these conspiracy theorists that some of them unfortunately in charge of our healthcare that say, oh, it doesn't really matter what you do. And let's go back to Ignaz Semmelweis. The price is paid in human life.
Hmm.
They say mask is a conspiracy theory. So vaccination is they want to get a chip in you to track you and so on. Who I'm most of those people are not really anybody who anybody wants to track to start with. but but the price of that, we paid that price of that in human life between 2019 and 2022. The
Hmm.
price of this kind of behavior, not understanding, is not trivial, is not funny, really. It is, we doctors, we pay that price um, in human life, in human lives.
Yeah, and Florida this week actually just took away all mandates for vaccines.
And you know what it produces? It produces a pool of unvaccinated people who are practically the cesspool of all this problem to spread out to everywhere else.
Can you do me a favor? Can you look up the population demographics of Florida?
It's about 19 million. I don't have to look it up.
No, the demographics, like what's the breakdown in elderly versus like
Florida
young?
has more elderly than any other states because lots of elderly people go and retire in Florida, and it gets even better. They go to villages, they have wild parties, and now they are not vaccinated. There are lots of unvaccinated. I think Florida is cutting itself off of its people that bring money in. These people have lived somewhere else. They are well-to-do. They want to spend their life or their retirement in Florida, better weather, and have a good time. And now they're going to get these infection diseases that we know based on germ theory is real because there's a lots of you see, it has consequences. If the train is the thing, you don't need to vaccinate. You don't need to do this and that.
Yeah, but I disagree. Even if the terrain is the problem, you still need to vaccinate because just because your terrain is fine doesn't mean your grandma's terrain is fine. I know both of my grandmas have a really rough terrain. So if I have a cold, I should not, even if it's true, even if 100% terrain theory, screw germ theory, if germs are just opportunistic and it's all about the terrain, and I have a germ and I go to my grandma's, both of them are going to get extremely sick because of my opportunistic germs.
Okay, well, you're talking if we could reason with this kind of thinking,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have to go 200 years back and talk about Ignaz Semmelweis and how people used to die when they didn't believe in germ theory. So you're thinking that there is a way you can reason with crazy. So I doubt that.
Okay, so what scientific discoveries come to your mind when you hear germ theory? Like what was really cementing?
3 point. Ignaz Semmelweis that by removing something from your hand, 10 times less people die. Um, Pastors that not only you can take the agent from one location and infect healthy animals with the agent from the dead or diseased animal, but as well you can alter whatever you take, make it weaker, and create literally immunization, vaccination. The word vaccine, do you know where it's come from?
Yeah, vaca, right?
Yeah. What does that mean?
Something about the cows.
Something about the cows. Exactly. What exactly?
The cow's pancreas.
No.
Oh
Um,
no, it was the girls were milking the cows and then they didn't get the uh
Smallpox. Smallpox.
smallpox and then they started rubbing something on the boys.
No. How many people die of smallpox in the world now?
Not many
Zero. We eradicated it.
for now.
Well, it is there are two pool of uh, smallpox, in two organizations. One is in CDC in Baltimore. The other one is somewhere in Europe. I don't, forgot where it was. On a triple secured place, there are small amount of smallpox viruses still there. But beside that, it's eradicated.
But
The
wasn't measles eradicated from the US?
But measles returned for a different reason. Let me stay on this story because this story is important. Now, how many people there died 200 years ago from smallpox?
Probably a lot, like 1 in 20.
Millions, millions. 90% or to some estimates 70 to 80% of the Native American didn't die of white people killing them. They died of smallpox because
Mhm.
they weren't immune like the European who had to deal with that over the centuries and so on. So we went from millions of people annually dying of smallpox in outbreaks and so on to zero people dying from smallpox. Okay. And we did that because an old thing that was observed that when this woman who milked the cow and they get a mild form of cowpox, they were immune to smallpox. Children, how many times, you have 10 children and seven of them die these days.
These days, not common
Well,
in
you
the
don't have 10
US.
children because you don't have to have 10 children because if you have 10 children, all of them will survive today. But people used to have 12 children. Like, let me give you an example. Like, many kings, many big, and those are people who were doing well. They had 10 children, only three of them would survive to become adults. Okay? And they would die. So people know in these villages, people know children would die. So they would do literally knew that their girls would die less. What was the difference? The girls would milk, the boys wouldn't, and then they literally would get the, the this material from smallpox, from the cowpox. They would drop it on their children. Literally, that knowledge was there, and then either the children would survive, or if they would get, they wouldn't get the disease, or they would get that, it would be much milder. They wouldn't die. Have you seen a person with a smallpox? How they look like?
No.
It was disease was eradicated when I was like 25 years old. In my time, I still got the smallpox. I still have that. And to do that with us, they would show us picture of how a child with the smallpox looked like. It's like a horror from directly from a horror movie. So we had that knowledge that if you take that thing from the cow and rub it on healthy people, they would survive. And hence the word vaccination, connecting to a cow or touching a cow or taking the cow, I would call it like a cowization of a vaccination. That's where it come from. And that now what Pasteur did, he made a science out of it, not just one village doing this and that. He identified the actual thing from that part, and he took the actual smallpox or other things, and he put heat on them, changed it a little, but not too much, so that it doesn't change too much. So it attenuated. We call that attenuation or weakening of the agent. What he really did, he denaturated the protein just enough. So that smallpox is a virus, right? We had no idea what virus is,
Mhm.
but we know the virus changes when you put heat on it. But if you put too much heat on it, it has no similarity to original virus. But if you put just enough, it is not strong enough to cause disease, but still the texture of the virus is still good enough to create our immune system to fight against the actual virus. And how do we know that? We know that because people who got the smallpox and survived, they would be immune. They would never get that again. And we knew that as well. See, all the knowledge was written off the wall, but Semmelweis, Pasteur, literally they showed what it works. And then Koch, we call it in German, actually could see the actual bacteria. Obviously, he didn't have the structure like an electron microscope to be able to see a virus. So viruses were still a mystery. But the germ theory proved that it is must be something that we cannot see with the microscope. It must be smaller because when we made the pores, we made like they used certain kind of stone or natural material that it wouldn't let bacteria go through, and then certain disease like there were like a purpura fever and so on could be prevented, but other disease that they were virus based, they still could be produced when you get the fluid through that, like a sieve, like a filter, and so on. So you see, these are all scientific method, and people work their lives on it. Like Semmelweis died because of it, because he was driven to madness because people they couldn't just admit what there was in front of them. That if you wash your hand, 10 times less people die. Don't we have to deal with that even today? I think, look at what we are doing. I just was looking at LinkedIn. People are still propagating and patting their back and each other back, and because they did the old-fashioned surgery and did it so good, and everybody's proud of them. And we know uh, how many people died there, how many people are maimed there, how many more infection rate have there. And the same thing, humans are human and we still have fight to same thing. But it really bugs me about this terrain theory is that it set us back 200 years
Yeah.
When people were dying in millions.
In my opinion, if you want to believe in train theory, okay, fine. But do it by yourself and do it alone. Don't try and force other people to join you and don't be the head of a government. Don't be in charge of healthcare talking about terrain theory. I think that that's when it gets dangerous. If because you said it yourself, there are a few aspects of terrain theory that are true.
It's a kind of truth in that it's a balance between your resources you have to spend and how much stress the germs, the infection agent put you inflict on you.
Exactly. So as a doctor, because I know that you like you were working all day yesterday, so you weren't paying attention to the trials and everything. When I told you today that we were going to be talking about germ theory versus terrain theory, how does that make you feel about the next 20 years?
I think I'm a, you see, in generally, me, and you think I'm a negative person and everything is thing and so on. Actually, I am a rationalist and I have a very positive attitude to humanity. And that is that it is interesting that you are the sunny, bubbly person, and I'm always the everything can go wrong if you're walking. I think that that branch of a tree is going to fall on our head and so on, and you're all about enjoying the moment and so on. But in the overall kind of things, I think I'm more positive than anybody else. I think human intellect will always get us to a better place. So in the next 20 years, we have overcome all this madness, this craziness. In the next 20 years, we are going to be in much better place because the truth has its own way to come out, and horrific bad thing that some people propagate has its own way to kill itself.
True.
You sent me a meme today morning. Do you remember that meme?
I don't want to talk about it.
That is the thing, you know? The bad thing, they shut themselves down.
But what about, okay, so what about in the next 2 years? Let's be more immediate because I think that I agree with you. I think in 20 years, this will be something that everyone looks back on and is like, how did that happen? But I think in 2 years, people are going to be like, what
In
the
2 years,
hell
people
is
will
going
die. In 2 years, with these policies, people will die.
on? That's what I
Yes.
think.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh well, something that we think the same way.
Yay. Well, do you
Yay.
have anything else that you want to add about germ theory?
Oh no, that upset me enough. So I think
Yeah, I
I'm
didn't
done
mean to.
with that.
I thought you would like the topic.
Mm.
Thank you guys for watching. This was Essence of Science, and we talked about germ theory versus terrain theory. I'm Amanda Armagast.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi. Get vaccinated, carry a mask, um, and wash your hand if you want your loved one to survive. Okay, thank you.